a social security card, without a birth certificate, without any of this the necessary information to be able to go and collect these things. Um, you know,
But you ever notice that the theory doesn't go that far? It starts out like they're mooching the system, and then you ask like, okay, how? And like explain it, and it's like it's just defense. It's just like a wall.
yeah,
Because it's no longer really as much fact as what you feel.
yeah.
Like, well, I feel like this is true. Okay, that doesn't matter. But in some ways, with the social media and the age of really like a choose your own story type truth, yeah, it is. Why not?
And
Um,
what's also crazy is like if you look at that, right? Like people will be quick to say, well, everybody in January 6th, they were coerced, there were like secret agents, all of this stuff. And then okay, let's get rid of the violence, right? Like what about the fake electors? Donald Trump tried to submit 7 fake electors for 7 different states that he said got the certificate of ascertainment from the governors that were voted on in the General Assembly to be our electors, and people were actually convicted for those things. Yet Donald Trump had to run to the Supreme Court in order to beg for immunity because he knew he was guilty, which is just, like I said,
yeah.
it's just very odd to me.
I think it's interesting because I was watching a video fairly recently about some January 6th defendants. And I don't make a blanket statement, but for these specific stories that I was hearing, it was sad. It was concerning that a mother couldn't see her children because of what happened on January 6th. That doesn't justify what happened, or that doesn't mean to say that like I think she wasn't, or she was right, right? Like I don't think she was right. I think all of those people who did those things should have been arrested. But I do think it's one thing for mothers to not be able to see their kids because of the actions on January 6th, fathers being in jail, but the man who instigated it, who told you again and again and again that he won the election, lied again and again and again.
Yeah.
He doesn't get any punishment. Why? Because he's a wealthy white man.
Yeah.
And like he's able to game the system. And it's not to say that every wealthy white man games the system or every white man has the ability to game the system. You don't.
Right.
But where there's a certain class of people in this country who, if their needs are to get passed or, to have their little Republican buddies do stuff for them, like, I mean, when you look at the Supreme Court and things like that, the immunity for Donald Trump was only immunity for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Don't act like it applied to anybody else.
Right.
And that's the thing, like when you begin to legislate for the whims of one particular person because you think you're going to get some sort of benefits from the system that he creates, um, I mean, it's a very concerning level of politics, which I feel like is kind of us circling back to the billionaire class and the working for them
Yeah.
to
You,
the
you
inauguration.
you say it's like concerning. I look at it more as devastating, right? Like if
Well,
you're able
I
to get,
don't view it as new. I don't view it as really being that. I don't think it's been that different. I think it's always been that way. We
I think
just now are seeing it more.
I think we made a lot of progress over the past like 20 years, and then suddenly Donald Trump kind of came into office and started to roll things back. People started to realize, okay, well, maybe he's not the right fit for the job, and then they voted him out. We got Joe Biden, got 4 years of Biden, and then all of a sudden now we're right back to where we were at square one in 2016, right? Like we brought back Donald Trump. And I think that big part of the issue is that, well, for one, Democrats just aren't getting out the message the correct way because Donald Trump is a salesman. He's always been a salesman. He's always been able to get people to vote against their best interests because everyone's worried about whether or not a trans man or woman is going to be in their bathroom. When in the reality, if you go to a lot of these rural areas, because I've lived in these rural areas, you don't. I can honestly tell you, I lived in outside of Fayetteville in North Carolina for like over a year. Not once did I see any trans man or woman try to enter a bathroom that I didn't even see any trans people, right? Like these are issues that aren't even affecting the rural areas that,
Mhm.
are voting for because they're like, oh, well, there's this boy that was a girl that's trying to go into my bathroom. And then all of a sudden it's just like, well, these aren't even issues that are actually affecting you, right? Like you are actually being impacted by the price of groceries. You're actually being impacted by a lot of these other issues that you are just completely ignoring because Donald Trump said that this is the real issue, that the radical left is the real issue.
I mean, when you look at the conversations he was even having on the campaign trail, he was going to protect women from Venezuelan gangs and uh, I guess illegal immigrants,
Yeah.
which I think is a very interesting conversation from, protecting women from a man like Donald Trump.
Said grab
But
them by
I,
the without their consent, right?
yeah, which I mean, like, yeah. Um, but I do think that it kind of goes hand in hand with the conversations around DEI and race and, you know, just people who live a different type of lifestyle than what's considered a norm, which, there is no norm in America. That's the thing. But I do think it's tied in with that because there's such a conversation around protecting women from who? Like, do you think the majority of people who are rapists and sexual assaulters are trans people? No. It's most likely either a father or some family member,
Or a friend.
some relative that, gets a little handsy or something like that, that people will ignore time and time again. But then they're protecting from the gangs or these different set groups of people. Like it's a conversation that I think is useful when you're trying to make an argument, and then you get to ignore it when it's men that you like or men that you support who are questionable with women.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why we're sitting here having a conversation with like some of the particular cabinet nominees. Oh, well, he did this or he might have done that. Okay, you voted for a man who did those things for president. Like, why does it matter at this point?
Yeah.
Like, I think we're acting like there are some sort of standards that guide these things, and I think a lot of times the standards are only applied to people who aren't in the elite, right? Like you and me, yeah, we're impacted by those things. Other people, they'll find a way out.
Yeah.
They'll fail upwards. And it's always what happens with certain people.
Yeah, it's funny because like you were saying, like I think it's like what over 70 to 75% of sexual assaults are committed by people that you actually know.
Yeah.
Yeah, just very, very odd to me that we can go and pretend like, that they're the ones that are trying to protect us. But also, like, I hate whenever they say that the trans people are the ones that are like, rapists and that saying like, oh, if you're a biological man or you're a biological woman, you can't go into X bathroom or Y bathroom, right? And I always look at this like, are you saying, and then all of a sudden that's going to suddenly get rid of all the rapists? Like, if that was true, like, why not? It's the whole thing with gun owners who say, well, if there was gun-free zones wouldn't actually work because people with guns are still going to go there and commit crimes if they really want to, right? Like, if rapists are going to want to get into these bathrooms, you think that all of a sudden, if just because you put something like no rapists allowed in bathroom, that suddenly rapists are just suddenly going to not come. Like,
Up, I see the sign, gotta avoid it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
no, I mean, I also think that, I mean, I begin to question, like, how do you enforce that? Like, you can make it a law, but like, where's the enforcement mechanism? And a lot of it would be, I guess you station a cop at the bathroom and then he tells everybody to pull down your pants. Like, what does that look like?
I would.
And I think it goes back to, this whole conversation around women and women's protection and women's safety or even young girls' safety or young girls' opportunity is, I think in some ways, some people are attempting to have a decent conversation, even if I don't necessarily agree with where they're coming from and things like that. I do understand people's critiques, but when you begin to hear this rhetoric being used really to justify bigotry, to justify your perceived notions of these people,
Yeah.
right? This set of group is like this, when it's like, no, no set group of people, no matter race, gender, sexuality, any of those things are set to being bad people, right? Like I don't think we should label entire groups as these people are bad because then it just reinforces negative stereotypes. And I mean, we already see with trans individuals overall that their life is significantly more of a struggle. One, just for like I think personal acceptance, but also like with violence. Like trans women specifically experience a lot of violence.
Yeah.
And think people view those things as separate sometimes, as the rhetoric being over here and what's actually happening being over here. But I mean, they're deeply tied. When you sit there and you don't, you know, you justify excluding another group or talking about another group, you know, for example, just real quickly about the bans on trans women in women's sports. Um, you know, the amount of people who actually this is impacted by are significantly low. Like I think in some states it's like one person.
Yeah.
So you're telling me you basically legislated for that one person on that team in that state to get removed.
Yeah.
How do you think that makes somebody feel? And I know you can say, "Oh, well, what about the other people?" No, no, no. You're making one person be targeted for how they live their life. It's ridiculous to sit there and legislate for one person because if it was some other issue and we saw that happening, we would say, "No, that's not right."
Yeah.
But we let it slide.
It seems like the smallest things are the things that we legislate on the most. But anyways, I know you have to go. I know I have to go. We are going to pick up another this probably either this conversation or another one in a couple days.
Mhm.
So stay tuned, everyone. We will be back. And well, Chase, I will talk to you later, my friend.
All right. Talk to you later.
Peace.